This is the Storyworks Roundtable, where we have conversations about craft. Because becoming a successful author begins with writing a great story. In my new Plot Masterclass, we are going to explore all things plot, from opening to closing scene. As a live workshop, you'll develop a new full-length novel from scratch with guidance every step of the way. Besides crafting a plot arc, I'm going to teach you my unique storyboarding process that I've been using with coaching and editing clients for over 8 years. You're going to leave this workshop with the dynamic storyboard ready to guide your drafting process without ever quashing your creative freedom along the way. The course is open for enrollment now and begins on March 1st. Go to storyworksfiction.com to sign up. This week, we've got part 2 of our episode, Plot Problems Solved. We pick up where we left off with Catherine telling us what kind of trouble she has with plot. If you haven't heard last week's episode, head over to storyworkspodcast.com and check it out.
So my problem is kind of opposite of Robert's.
Excellent.
So I love my middles. I feel like there's so much to do and so much that can go on, and I've kind of put everything in these large boxes so I can avoid those silly try-fail cycles that just end up being try-fail, fail, fail, fail.
Yes.
So I love my middles, and I have struggled insanely with the events in the first act and the events in my third act and making them feel like they bridge together.
Okay.
So I can get from Act 1 to Act 3 through the middle and feel very confident in the events that happen. But then I'm not entirely sure that my beginning supports my ending, or that my ending and my beginning make sense together. So that's where I'm struggling a lot, is does my climax match the promises that I'm saying in the beginning? Like, this is what this book is going to be about. And then, and all of that good stuff. So I'm having problems in the wings.
Okay.
Whereas Robert's struggling with the middle there.
Yeah. So are you, do you have a clearly defined villain or antagonistic force? Because not every villain is a black hat. We've talked about that before on the show, but okay.
I have 2 layers of antagonists, and I have one that is very clearly being taken care of in this book. So yes, it goes from beginning to end with the one main antagonist. Yes.
Okay. And is the Velcro between your protagonist and your antagonist clearly established and sufficient to keep that conflict going through the entire book's arc?
Maybe one of them. That might be my problem. Just the one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that might be the problem, that you're, usually, so in the classic structure, your inciting incident sets the hero on the journey toward the climax, right? And so at that point, the promise you make in that inciting incident should be directly related to your climax, so
I think that's where I'm really struggling, is because it's the inciting incident that's right now kicking my butt. Like, as I speak, wrote a scene this morning, scrapped the whole scene by this afternoon because it felt wrong. Because I know where my climax is, because I think a lot of the times our seeds for ideas kind of come from that climactic moment, right? We're like, oh, I know this really cool thing, or I know that, and so it's like I know where I'm going, and I know what I want to deliver there, and it feels like my inciting incident either isn't big enough or is too big, depending on how I throw it, and I haven't been able to find that balance.
Right. So let's look at The Wizard of Oz. The climax is Dorothy has to stand up to the Wicked Witch of the West and save her friends, specifically Scarecrow, from being killed by fire, right? Mm-hmm. So Dorothy throws water on the witch melts, villain is vanquished, now she can go to the wizard and go home. Mm-hmm. So what is the inciting incident that leads Dorothy to set off on this journey? And here we've got this beautiful actual yellow brick road leading us from inciting incident to climax. It couldn't be more perfect, but her house lands on the Wicked Witch of the East. Mm-hmm. Okay, could we get more parallel than that? Right. She's got to vanquish a wicked witch. This journey begins with her vanquishing a wicked witch. They just happen to be sisters. And so, you could say, well, okay, the house falling on the witch, that's incidental. Dorothy didn't cause that. That's true. That's how inciting incidents are. And then Glinda puts the shoes on Dorothy's feet. Again, Dorothy didn't really choose that, but Dorothy chose to set off down the yellow brick road. So here we have that idea of the point of no return, number one, where your protagonist makes a choice to set off on this journey, right? Mm-hmm. So again, beautiful imagery. Dorothy actually chooses to walk down the road and set off on this journey. So look at your climax and your inciting incident, and what kind of relationship do they have? They don't have to be as blatantly parallel as it is in The Wizard of Oz, right?
But it might be helpful to start there.
Yeah.
Right? To make it blatantly parallel and then say, okay, or maybe back it off. That would be a really good thing for me to do. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
And the other thing you can do is maybe think about the inciting incident as not necessarily one thing. So as a leader's referred to there, there's a coincidental beginning for Dorothy, and then there's a causative where she takes agency. And so I think that's a very clever combination there of because it makes it more believable. Something happens in their life, something lands on your doorstep, or somebody rings the bell, or there's the classic thing, but it's what you do with that then.
Right.
Or what your main character does with that.
Right. The choice.
So I think we can sometimes get caught up in an inciting incident when it can be a series of consequential things that happen that kicks that off.
Right. And that's kind of what I've come up with for my other protagonist, because it's a multiple point of view story. Like, she has much more of a causal train that leads her to making a decision. And there is a couple of incidents in there that you could kind of like put your finger on if you really wanted to. But it definitely feels much more like this avalanche of things that's pushing her into that decision. And she ultimately has to make the decision. She could say no, but so it's the other character that he's more fighting the human villain. She's more fighting the spiritual villain. So it's like a different setup feel to it. Very much different.
Yeah, I want to add that the the choice we've been talking about and that Robert was just bringing up, yes, 100% that choice is critical. We don't want it to feel coincidental. And so if we look at The Wizard of Oz again, Dorothy has agency before the inciting incident. The old cranky neighbor comes to take Toto away, and Dorothy, swats her hands and begs her aunt and uncle not to let Toto go away. And when Toto comes back to her, she leaves home. She runs away. So we know she's spunky. We know she's got agency. We know she's got courage, right? We know she's protective of those she loves. We see all of these qualities before the tornado comes whipping across the fields. So,
go on.
So those qualities are established in Act 1 in our introductions and setup. And then there is that series of incidental events, the tornado, the house landing in Oz and falling on the witch, and Glinda putting the shoes on her, right? So all of those things create the inciting incident. Just like Luke comes home with the droids and the farm is burned and his aunt and uncle are dead, right? Luke didn't choose that or cause it or have any say in it. Likewise with Dorothy. But Dorothy sets off down the yellow brick road. Luke goes back to Obi-Wan Kenobi, where we know he's going to apprentice as a Jedi Knight. So that's the moment of choice that is the gateway between Act 1 and Act 2.
Mm-hmm. And also both of those have, beautiful mirror structure to their climax, really, as well, because Luke is standing up to his aunt and uncle, and he's stubborn and he's resistant. Right. It's the same with Yoda, and then finally he has to face off with the big bad, and kind of get over all that.
Who, spoiler alert, is his father, right? So there it is again. That Dad, what?
I can't believe it.
Right. Oh, did I say that? Oh no, sorry, anyone who hasn't seen Star Wars.
And then, but with Dorothy also, there's a mirror there too, because there's something that she has no control over. Someone wants to take her dog away, but she stands up for it, and so there's a mini hero's journey within that. There's a mini kind of, no, you're not going to do that. I have to go on this path. I have to, and she wins. So any of those things that give, we used to call them in NLP deep metaphor. So if you've got someone has a very resistant conscious mind, so if you're counselling them, and most of us do, let's face it, we want to talk ourselves into it being told. Then one way that hypnotherapists do that is by using deep metaphor. And so they'll talk about something completely obscure story-wise. So the content is almost bizarre. There was this silvery cloud that floated by one day, and the person goes into a trance. What the hell are you talking about, silvery cloud? And metaphorically, it's analogous to the structure of the person's problem. And so what you're doing is you're taking him through this story, but in that story, it's pulling apart their problem and putting together a solution. I know I'm sounding very conceptual here, because it actually is.
Right.
And so, but if you ground that again in, say, Dorothy's problem with the dog, it's the identical structure really to her problem with the witch. She's got to stand up to people to get what she holds dear back again.
Exactly. And when she defeats the witch, it's because she's saving the scarecrow.
Exactly.
Right. And just like with Toto and the neighbor.
So we've already proven to the reader that that's what she does. But she hasn't learned to do it on a grand scale yet. So the goal, and I think this is sometimes the thing we think is the inciting incident. The thing with the dog is really a hook, but it's still a great hook that leads to the inciting incident. Her normal world is still her normal world, but it shows that when she's dealing with the extraordinary world, she's got some underlying history of how she deals with that. That her choices make more sense when presented with something that is completely out of control, out of the blue, like Luke's fingers. Anyway, I'm talking too much.
Well, we're just agreeing with you here, but I want to point out that character development, we're talking about plot, but you can't escape character and even setting. Everything is interwoven. And when you're developing your protagonist, I talk about character traits on two levels. One is qualities and one is skills. So when we look at Dorothy or Luke or Harry or Buffy or any of these classic hero's journey characters, when we meet them at the very beginning, we see those inherent qualities, those deep aspects of their personalities, of their psyches, like courage, loyalty, spunkiness, even being willing to challenge authority. All of those things are introduced as part of that being. And so those inherent qualities create the foundation for the skills that the hero needs to learn on the journey. So lightsabers, magic wands, slaying vampires with wooden stakes, I don't know what skills she learns per se that are quite as parallel to those, but we believe they can tackle these challenges and adopt these skills and grow into the fighters that they need to grow into by the climax, because we've got the foundation of qualities. right? So as they go through those, you win some, you lose some conflicts. Each one of those adds a layer of skill and resolve and deepens the inherent qualities of bravery, loyalty, etc. So that by the time we get to the climax with the big bad, the reader is fully invested in who and what the protagonist has become.
Nice. I think at some point we should also do an episode where we focus on, you could argue it's literary style, but where it's a very internal story. Mm-hmm. Yeah, where it's a psychological, because the same things apply, but they're executed differently, I think, personally, anyway. Yes. So I think it'd be interesting for our audience, because we've talked about what's easy to talk about, the big action stories, because it's all externalized, so it's very easy to present it and say that's how the plot is unfolded. But when the plot has to unfold because it's a very personal journey, or it's a memoir, or something that requires a different deft hand with the storytelling, but it's similar principles.
It is, definitely, and the film I picked out for the course is actually one of those that is an interior story. I'm excited about it, because I was okay, they can't all be action stories, and they aren't. But even when you have a more interior journey and a non-black hat antagonistic force, you still need to have a plot arc commensurate with the character arc. So what is the character's struggle? How does the character learn and grow and develop into the person ready for that challenge, that crisis, that epiphany that comes at the climax? Right? So we're still looking at the same structure. It's just harder to put into easy terms, easily representative terms, when you are looking for intangibles. But I like your idea, Robert. Maybe we'll pick a movie that we can watch and review, just because it saves time. It's a quicker, easier way to look at long-form story arcs.
And actually, a movie is a good idea for something like that, because it's all too easy to default to the action movies. But the movies where they've taken something which is an interior story, and let's face it, if you're reading an interior story that's really well done, your chances are you're really deep inside some character's head. And that's very hard to do in film, because you're relying on actors' quirks and cues. So if it works, it means it's really well directed, and we get a very good sense of what that interior story is. So I actually think they're even more compelling to use as this is how this beautiful story got played out visually, because it means it already worked in some way, shape or form, because they were able to turn it into film. Most of those interior stories don't lend themselves to film very well at all, because there's not much to hang it on, so they found a way to make the external world believable and mirror their interior journey without all the banging and crashing of an action movie. Then that's fantastic.
Yeah, and I think it's easy for people to think interior story and forget that we still need these critical elements of plot. Two of my favorite movies, American Beauty and Stranger Than Fiction, and we watched Stranger Than Fiction for the character master class. Those are very interior, but you still have a character who wants something and is pursuing something and confronting obstacles along the way to the climax. So those are both fun, entertaining journeys without much in the way of action, but we could still graph their plots with these key elements according to these, acts and incidents and...
I think that the biggest thing about those sort of stories is the dissonance between what they think they want and what they actually need. And if you can keep that going in a story, then that's why I'd like to weave through my action-driven story. Well, not necessarily action-driven, but it's the sci-fi action adventure. But I don't want I don't want a two-dimensional plastic character leading
right.
it. You know, I don't want a Mary Sue. You know, I want somebody who has those internal struggles, but I don't necessarily want those to be thrown in the reader's face either. So I think reading those interior stories is a wonderful way to soak up how authors who specialize in that type of plot carry that off, because there's always things you can bring into a big action story.
Right.
There we go.
I'm looking at Catherine.
It's just, for me, it's like you forget that things that are events, right? Like you forget that, like, okay, you can take your character and take them to an external thing, like, I don't know, dinner with the family. And that can be a massive problem for them because of what's going on. And so the stakes could be really, really high. But your plot point is dinner with a family, right?
Yeah.
So it doesn't have to be massive. It doesn't have to be the car wreck or the, you know, anything crazy. It could just be something that pushes their buttons. That's what you want. So it can be the quiet events can still be climactic and high stakes for that character.
Right. Right. And watching some really good quality family drama stories can be a great way to access this, because you often have, you know, sometimes there's one clear protagonist, as in Ordinary People, and sometimes it's more of a chorus cast, as in August Osage County, but you see a lot of story movement and development through dialogue and through interpersonal relations. And so the action that advances the story isn't about the fight, the car, the explosion, the robbery, the, you know, whatever.
Right.
It's about how people are living and being together. And there's so much friction there. You know, we can forget that when we're focused on events instead of on the relationship elements of our stories. So if you aren't writing thrillers or action adventure dramas, check out some good plays and movies like those I've already named. Check out the dialogue, check out the relationships, and see if you can graph the plot on an arc without those big events. Plot course is open for enrollment. It starts on March 1st. It's an 8-week live classroom course. So I will be doing this with the students, answering questions. We'll have a student forum. I'm doing a bonus unit on dialogue, because I know dialogue is an issue a lot of people want to, or not an issue, a craft topic a lot of people want to develop and grow with. So all the details are at storyworksfiction.com. Thank you for listening to the Storyworks Roundtable. Find all our shows, show notes, and videos at storyworkspodcast.com.